This is Dan Dix here, reporting for Press for Truth with breaking news today. Apparently, an emergency has been declared at the border by Donald Trump. And joining us here to help us understand this apparently breaking news is the one and only G. Edward Griffin. Sir, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Now, this is just breaking. I just heard the news about an hour ago that Trump has declared an emergency at the border. So I want to talk a little bit about that. But first of all, what are your thoughts on the current debate in the U.S. about this concept of a massive border wall going up? It's a pretty hot topic right now.
Oh boy, yeah, it's almost impossible to have any opinion on that without getting into an argument. And that's, of course, it means right away it tells you it's two things. It tells you it's very important. It tells you that there's a lot of different views on it. And it also tells me, at least, that when I see those things together, there's probably some deception somewhere. There's some misinformation. It's not what you think it is. Whenever the emotions get really high, it's often the case. And so, you know, I've lived quite a few years. I've been around traveling around the sun 87 times, and it's a lot of mileage. And I've seen these kinds of things happen before, and you never really figure out what really happened until maybe 10 years later. So I've grown a kind of a skepticism. I'm not quick to rush to judgment, in other words. So I'm looking very carefully to see what might be, not necessarily is, but what might be hidden behind all of this. And of course, that doesn't answer your question. I'm not trying to evade the question, but I'm trying to soften the blow that in the sense that I don't necessarily see it the way it's being described. And I know that we've been moving toward this for quite a while. You could see that just in the reading between the lines. Everybody was saying, well, we've got this big crisis. We have to do something about it. I sure hope we don't have to declare martial law. I sure hope we don't have to have a national emergency. I sure hope we don't have to arrest people. But you knew right away when they start talking that way, that's what the plan probably is, and they want to soften you up to that possibility. And so I look at this as kind of what's going on in the bigger picture. What's the bigger picture, and does this fit into that bigger picture? Well, the bigger picture is not so good either. In fact, it's even worse. The bigger picture is that the United States is being pushed and shoved and scared and cajoled in every possible way to give up its sovereignty, to give up its affinity to the human rights that are in our Declaration of Independence, to give up our liberties, our freedoms, our judicial system, habeas corpus, all the things, give them up in the name of some kind of a great crisis. So we've got to solve this crisis right away. It's going to be terrorism or pornography or drugs, or, you know, we get all excited about these things that have so much emotional overtone that we don't stop and think, what are the solutions being offered? And the solutions, now we come to the point of all this, the solutions are always the same. More government, more power, and higher taxes. Now, is this a coincidence? Well, I don't think it is. I'm one of those guys that thinks this is one of the few things I happen to agree with FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He said, in politics, there are no such things as a coincidence. These don't happen. And I kind of agree with that. So now, getting back and giving all that background, I'm afraid that the wall is one of in that category. I think if we really did, if we wanted to put a stop to illegal immigration, we wouldn't need a wall. I think all we would need to do is stop giving the illegal immigrants the benefits. That's all, because that's why they're coming. And that's not because I hate them or not because I have no compassion. I also love my own country, too, and I have compassion for the people who are being literally plundered and squeezed out of their heritage, too, because of all this. A lot of things going wrong. Nobody comes out ahead on this except the politicians. See, that's the thing. So that's how I look at it. I see it's more of the same on a grander scale, and there's a lot of deception going on, I think. So that's what I'm looking at, and we'll see. We'll probably know within the next few months what really squeezes out of this orange. It might not be orange juice.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the endgame agenda here, because you're a man who's been covering for decades now the plan for a one world government, you know, for all the governments of the world to be united under one umbrella. And it seems to me it would be necessary for the sovereignty to be eroded, for borders to be erased, in order for something like a New World Order, one world government type system to exist. So do you see this as kind of a path towards them securing this New World Order?
Well, yes, I do. It seems kind of crazy to say that because here we are talking about securing the borders, right? That seems to be. It seems to be on the surface that that's we're going to preserve our borders and our sovereignty. But you have to look further than that. What they're really saying, and even in the Trump administration now, who've got this image of being, to put a stop to this flood of immigration and putting a stop to this drain on our economy and to the destruction of our culture, or the pollution, or we call it the dissolution of our culture, and we put a stop to all of this us against them and the different classes and races and ethnic and all so forth. And that's the image that the administration has. And yet I noticed here just this last week, Mr. Trump said, well, we're going to put a stop to this illegal immigration for sure. And then he said, well, in order to do that, we're going to increase the legal immigration. He's not putting a stop to the numbers. He's just making it legal now instead of illegal. And everybody's going, right, put a stop to illegal immigration. But he's talking about numbers that exceed what we're now doing. So the numbers are going to go up. Right. But the verbiage and the propaganda, the imagery, is the other way. Mm-hmm. And this is, I wish I didn't see these things because it makes me angry that there are people playing brain games with us.
Well, at this point, do we need to just counter the propaganda? Is information kind of the most important point at this stage in the game? Or what would you suggest is a good solution moving forward on how to counter all this?
Well, there are two ways to counter it, or to try to counter it. One, you can just try and use physical force and block it, which is contrary to my principles. And besides, it doesn't usually work in the long run. You can injure a lot of people, you can kill a lot of people, but in the end, you usually make things worse. So we go back to the other method, which is, as you suggest, information, knowledge, composure, evaluation, what is right, what is wrong. And regardless of what you would like to achieve, you have to also consider how you achieve it. Mm-hmm. You asked me a moment ago about this new world order, this world government. I think it applies to that in spades, because who would be opposed to a world state, a world government, if you want to call it a government, or the world state, a world system? Nothing wrong with that. In fact, it has a lot of advantages, and we hear about those all the time. But the question that is never asked is, what kind? What kind are you talking about? Are you talking about one which defends the life, liberty, and property of its citizens and guards freedom for the individual? Or are you talking about this collective beehive with all power at the top and people worshiping and serving the state? That's the kind that's being built. And nobody ever talks about what kind of government. They always just say, wouldn't it be nice if we had an end to all of these nasty warring nations? Mm-hmm. Well, if somebody throws you in prison or kills you, it doesn't make an awful lot of difference whether they're from another nation or from your own nation. If they're taking away your liberty or your freedom, then that's the bottom line.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it comes down to, and that's why we need to educate people about this. And I think you are doing a really good job in that. So just in closing, you have something coming up where people can learn all about this sort of stuff, the Redpillexpo. Just let people know a little bit about that and how they can find out information about the new one.
Well, thanks for that, Dan. Yeah, it's a very important project to me because, as we just said, information is the number one thing, and probably the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of it, really. Because if enough people of caliber, and by that I mean they have an instinct, they want to do something about it. They want to help. They don't want to just get their share before somebody else gets it. Maybe they want more than their share. So it's not a question of just people, how many people, but the right kind of people who really care about humanity and care about the planet, care about the environment. Not the sloganers, but the people that really care. If they had this information, then even though I can't imagine right now how we're going to really turn it around, but it would happen because if you have enough force of opinion. So anyway, obvious, I didn't reveal any great truth in that statement, but yeah. But then now the question is, How many? How many does it take? And the usual response, and I used to have this response, is, well, gosh, we'll never get enough people. Because look, the guy next door, my neighbor, he's out there pushing the lawnmower. He doesn't know about any of this stuff. And I try to talk to him about it. His eyes get glazed. He doesn't want to know because it's uncomfortable. I think, oh, well, there are too many people like that, I used to say. We'll never get, never turn it around. And then as I began to learn more about history, which in school I had no interest in history because the way they taught it, it was just, well, you got to remember the names and the dates and, all the factual stuff with no understanding of what the motives were behind the history, what was really down at the bottom, not on the surface. And then after I got into realizing that history is driven by human motives and human desires, and some of it, usually the victorious side is usually not the good side, but they always try and make themselves look good. I mean, there was never a conquering army that conquered another group of people by the sword and a lot of blood and slaughter that didn't eventually come out of that saying, well, look, here we are, look, we overcame the tyranny of the former ruler who was a bad guy, and we sacrificed, and here we are now, the new leaders, and everybody's playing the band and they're marching along behind. So what they say, the winner always writes the history books. So anyway, back to the question. So if we had this view that a world government was based on the principle of freedom and liberty and guarding the individual rights, it would be wonderful. So that's what the Redpillexpo is all about, is to allow people, not 52% of the population, but we're looking for, hope you're ready for this, 3% of the population. I found out, and it's not my invention or discovery, everybody who studied history knows that history is always written by 1% of the bloody population. 1%. And the rest are thinking, gee, what's going on, Mm-hmm. And even in the American Revolution, it was about 1% of the population that were actually fighting the war and raising the rabble and writing the pamphlets and having the meetings and getting the organizations going. 1%. And there was actually 1% on both sides. That's usually the case. So, no, we got 2%. If we could just marshal 1% of the population, that is a reachable goal. And so we began to think, how do we do that? We can't just come out and just dump the whole load on the public, I remember I used to do that when I was a young guy. I had to tell everybody about everything I was finding out, and I'd back up the truck, pull a lever, and dump it all on them, and they'd think I was crazy. And in a way, I guess I was, for try to educate somebody on so many things all at once, So we tried to think, how can we sort of make this more accessible to the average guy, like I used to be. We all came from that. And so we thought, let's have a little fun with it. And let's get the heaviness of the future of mankind and the future of civilization out of it, and just do something else. What else? And finally it hit me, this meme of the red pill that comes out of the Matrix movie. Take the red pill, get rid of illusion, and see reality. I thought, that might be it. Yeah. So we thought we'd give it a try. And we did 3 years ago. And blow me down, people came from all over the world, literally. Came from France, England, Canada even. And I'm just joking, of course, a lot of people came from Canada. But anyway, we struck the nerve. And so this is now the third one. And the idea simply is to invite people who have taken the red pill on something. It doesn't have to be something we agree with. Doesn't even have to be something we know anything about. In fact, that's even better. We could really honestly consider ourselves to be truth seekers. Yeah. And in order to say that you are a truth seeker is to acknowledge that you don't know all of the truths. If you knew all the truths, you wouldn't seek it. You got them all, right? Yeah. So it's kind of a humbling experience to have to take that position. I really don't know a lot. In fact, I probably don't know more. I know more of what how am I going to say this? There's more of what I don't know than what I do know. So we invite people who've taken a red pill, and we're sometimes thinking, gee, that sounds a little strange, but let's hear what they have to say. Mm-hmm. So that's what it is. And of course, in that mix, we have some very important things, including what we were just talking about, immigration, talking about what is the proper role of the state, talking about Is the best health care that which is mandated by a government, or is it freedom of choice that produces the best choice of, or the best medical care? And issues like that, heavy stuff. But it's in the environment of having some fun with it. Let's take a red pill.
Yeah, well, it's planting those seeds, and I liken it to like a pyramidal structure where we make up the base of this system. And if enough of us, maybe a few million, maybe that 3%, maybe a 10% tipping point, step out of that system, like a representation of the bottom brick removing itself from the pyramid, what starts to happen, the whole thing comes crumbling down. So all we need is that one brick tipping point, ladies and gentlemen, and perhaps the Redpillexpo is going to help us get us there. So once again, thank you so much for talking to us. I look forward to seeing you at Redpill in June 2019.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dan. I'll see you there. And I'll say goodbye to everybody and see you there, too.
We all want truth. The truth will set you free.